In this lesson, I'm going to talk about Kubernetes one more time. Now, we did mention what is Kubernetes, right, in one of the previous lessons. But here, moving forward, I want to talk about where we are within our projects, right, and what we've covered so far. And then moving forward, we'll jump into Kubernetes and creating clusters and pods and containers and so on, okay? So before I actually do this, just to recap and maybe good learning, reinforcing some of the concepts, let me reiterate some of the Kubernetes concepts and how does it fit into our large picture. All right, great. So this is more or less the architecture that we've been following along so far, okay? Now, what I've done so far in this course is, let me get my pen here. Here's our machine, right? So this is our machine right here. And on our machine, whether it's a laptop, server, whatever that is, we have our project code, right? Or our app, or the code that we create as web developers or as programmers. We did create a Docker file. So I demonstrated how to create a Docker file, right? And then of course, we created the images. We looked at various images. And then we placed them into containers. So once the images are in containers, these containers are then shipped to an online repository, such as hub.docker.com or quay.io, or you can push it from here, you can push it directly to your Google platform as well, which is the repository on the cloud. But I'm going to talk about this a little later. For right now, what we've covered so far is this part, okay? So this right section is what I've covered so far in the course. So we've created a Docker file, we worked with the images, we know what those are, we pulled the images onto the hub.docker.io, and then from here on out, we can either send it out to a staging server, for example, or our own production server. This I haven't done yet, so I'm going to cover this next. Or I can also send it out to the cluster or the cloud computing platform, such as the Google platform here. So basically, we pull the repository, right, from Docker Hub, and then all these containers, right, they end up in our Google platform. Now Kubernetes comes into play on this side of the section, okay? So this is where Kubernetes comes into action on the Google Cloud platform. What it does, it takes all these containers, right? And then it creates pods, and each pod can have many containers. So for example, these containers you can see can be into one pod, into a single pod, and so forth. And then also creates replication controllers. So if one of the containers were to fail, it would automatically replicate from the other container, and then your app, online app, or your software would not go down. Other benefit, obviously, of using Kubernetes is the scalability. So you can create more pods, you can add more VMs, you can scale your entire platform as needed. And this can be done automatically also, because Google can automatically scale based on the traffic coming to your site. So the left section here is something that we'll be covering in this section moving forward. So again, what we've done so far is Docker file, images, containers, and Docker Hub. And of course, we created the Ubuntu machine as well. I just wanted to cover this as I move forward. Let me in fact erase this. Next, obviously, is our cluster, which is our main part of the projects that we're doing. We're going to take our app and deploy it on our cluster. And then of course, take a look at how Google platform handles the cluster or the app and creates pods and replication controllers, services, labels, and so on. All right, so next, just in case you missed this, Kubernetes, let me get rid of these quick here. So Kubernetes is a powerful system, right, developed by Google for managing containerized application in a clustered environment. And Kubernetes, at its basic level, is a system for managing containerized applications across a cluster of nodes, right? Just like we saw in the diagram in the previous slide. So that's what Kubernetes does for us. I'm going to go over some of the important components or elements of Kubernetes, maybe just another 4 to 5 more slides. So a pod, as I mentioned earlier, is a basic unit that Kubernetes deals with. Containers themselves are not assigned to hosts. Instead, closely related containers are grouped together in a single pod. And a pod generally represents one or more containers that should be controlled as a single application, right? So if one of the containers within a pod fails, the other will take over. Service, when described this way, is a unit that acts as a basic load balancer, ambassador for other containers. Services are an interface to a group of containers providing a single access location. And by deploying a service, we easily gain discoverability and can simplify the container designs as well. So as we create these pods, we'll take a look at how service is also created and how we can work with that. Next are the replication controllers, which is basically a framework for defining pods that are meant to be horizontally scaled. And these controllers delegate responsibility over maintaining a desired number of copies, right? So you can create multiple replication controllers. This basically means that if a container temporarily goes down, the replication controller might start up another container. And if the first container comes back online, the controller will kill one of the containers. So just managing your containers within your pods. And also think of this as acting like a fault tolerance. And we have labels in Kubernetes, which are organizational concept outside of work-based units, is something called labeling. So a label is basically a tag that can be placed on the above work units to mark them as part of a group, right? So just to organize yourself, like a heading or a label or a title. These can be selected for management purposes and action targeting. And what we can do is we can give pods a name key as a general purpose identifier, right? So they just identify labels because you may have thousands, millions of pods and containers. So you want to make sure you label and organize yourself accordingly. So we took a look at the architecture, right? What we've done so far. And what we'll be doing next is obviously working with a cluster and Kubernetes. So it's an exciting project that implements many functional improvements on top of clustered infrastructure. While other technologies do a great job at handling the clustering aspects, Kubernetes aims to offer a better management system. So Kubernetes Revisited, I just wanted to go over some of the key terms one more time, and of course make sure that you're still with me on this course, right? So we've done half of it, and the other half is Kubernetes that we'll be doing next. So hope this helps. Let's move to the next lesson.